Why do people need to make connections and build networks? Think of your own current network. How large is it and what do you mostly use it for? Have you ever used a connection when looking for a job, for instance? What effect has this network had on your career? And I'd like to pick your brains today on more questions related to networking. For instance, what are the best places to go to network? And have you been to conferences, trade fairs, and other types of networking events? How were they? Did you make connections along the way? And how have these interactions boosted your job prospects? Also, think about questions. Consider what questions you would want to ask a person you had just met at a networking event, and likewise, what would you want them to know about you? Leave us your answers and suggestions in the comments below. We would love to hear more feedback from you today. Also, in terms of technology, how would you use technology to help build a network? Welcome to the Word of Mouth English Studio channel, where we discuss all things grammar, articulation, and accuracy to help boost your output and input language skills, and of course help with your speaking and writing confidence as well. In today's video tutorial, we'll be talking networking, so let's dive into it. The three expressions you see on my whiteboard now are from a TEDx video called How to Hack Networking by David Burkus, which gives advice on networking, especially by taking advantage of the people you already know, which I believe has been used for decades, but of course, some people tell me they don't believe in it, or they don't believe in the power of networking, which I greatly disagree with. I believe networking to be one of the greatest boosts to my personal career. It has basically kickstarted my career. Perhaps it could also kickstart yours. Hopefully we'll help you use some expressions today to discuss better how you wish to network in the future, or how you have done this. So the expressions that we'll be using today will help you talk about your own personal experience of networking in your CV or resume or your cover letter or your next job interview. So think of what these three expressions mean. Have you ever come across them before? If you have, how have you used them? If this is the first time you're looking at these expressions, then try to guess how they may be used by a native English speaker in context. We'll be listening to the context later, but before that, we'll move on to see what these expressions mean, alongside some other very important collocations that you'll be needing to understand this TEDx talk. Let's move on to see what they mean. Networking is a great way to get people on your side. It's a fantastic opportunity to make sure that you foster relationships at the beginning of your working relationship so that you can be more productive in future. It's a way of knowing who the person you're working with truly is. And today we'll talk about it in some more detail. I'll be sourcing some of my material today from yourenglishpal.com and some from TEDx.com. Let's have a look at some useful vocabulary. To hit someone up means to get in contact with someone, to ask them for a favour, for instance. Have you hit someone up? This is a separable phrasal verb. Mingling means mixing, talking to many different people at a social gathering or a party or an event. So think about Christmas parties, think about other social activities, barbecue Fridays, and all of those. Striking up a conversation simply refers to starting a conversation with someone. So you strike up a conversation, you start a conversation, or that's right, initiate conversation with somebody. It's the same thing. There are many different ways of saying it. To reach out to somebody is a verb. This is a phrasal verb meaning to make an effort to contact somebody. So, have you ever come across this expression? To reach out means to make contact with or to get in touch with somebody. How many times have you written an email that started out with, "Thanks for getting in touch," or "Thanks for reaching out"? Or similarly, you could start your LinkedIn communication or your email with the line, "I'm reaching out to you to discuss our new offers," or so on and so forth. Think about how you can use this in future. What is an icebreaker? Well, an icebreaker, being a noun, is a strategy used to relieve tension in communication or conversation, often when striking up a conversation with a person in a chat. So an icebreaker is another way of saying to make small talk, right? Think about how many times you have made small talk with other people before. Whereas social capital is the positive value we associate with human interaction in a particular context, such as in society or in business. Think of your social capital. How important is social capital to you as a professional? To me, for instance, it's particularly important because it's the way I built my business. Striking up conversations and interesting icebreakers helped me build my business to make it what it is today. Let's have a look at how we use each of these expressions in context in the next slide. In the following sentences, I've used the words that we have done above to complete the sentences 1 to 6 in different contexts. Of course, I filled in the answers for you and I remembered to use the correct form of the verb. What do we mean by this? That means we've conjugated each of these verbs correctly, either in present, past, future, and singular or plural nouns. Always take this into consideration before starting out your exercise or writing your email. Let's have a look at these statements and check whether you agree with them. There is no greater icebreaker than talking about the weather. In my case, I would have to say I definitely agree with this. When I was last in Milan to meet an important client of mine, I was caught in the pouring rain. And as I ran up the stairs to the building with my small umbrella, I noticed my suit got totally drenched. And by the time I entered, I was soaking. There was water all over the floor. My umbrella was kind of useless now because it was also rather windy. Luckily, my client, my point of contact, met me at the door and they were so really hospitable. They were so welcoming and so really cordial, so friendly. And they asked me, "Were you caught in the rain? Oh no, you're drenched. Let me take your umbrella for you." And they tried their best to make me really comfortable. They offered me coffee as soon as I got there. And of course, that led to another conversation. Is it the same in your country, or does it rain as much in Malta? To which, of course, I answered that it doesn't rain this heavily all the time. So we started a conversation about the weather. And that's how conversations truly start. So if you're afraid of starting out the conversation, if you don't feel comfortable doing this, let the other person lead and start the conversation. And you can just ease into it and feel more comfortable then. When I was in Munich for a conference another time, my point of contact picked me up and asked me, "How was your flight?" That was the first thing he asked me. And I thought that was the perfect icebreaker. So don't dismiss icebreakers like many people do, because in some countries icebreakers might not be popular. Don't dismiss them, embrace them, because icebreakers can make or break your business contacts. You can be seen as a trustworthy person or as an untrustworthy person, thanks to the way people communicate. It helps you understand who people are at face value. After having separated 7 years ago, my ex-husband reached out to me, but I wasn't interested in meeting him. So, when was the last time you reached out to somebody who didn't get back in touch? Or have you ever been contacted by someone whom you didn't want to reach out to? I love mingling at social events, or I love to mingle at social events are both correct. You can use the gerund or the to infinitive with love, dislike, hate, and of course, prefer and other expressions of the sort. So special verbs go with special types of verbs as well. If you need a place to stay when you visit London next month, hit me up and you can stay in my spare room. Hit me up. Get in touch, contact me, give me a call, drop me a line. You know, all of these expressions mean the same thing. Keep in mind, hit me up is a separable phrasal verb, and the pronoun always goes in between the verb and the preposition. The best way to strike up a conversation with someone is not to ask what they do for a living, but to ask them about their passions. So ask them about what makes them tick and what grinds their gears. What are they interested in? How can they help you? I couldn't agree with this statement more. Ask them to talk about themselves. Have a true feel of the person you're communicating with and networking with, because that's the real person behind the mask. What kind of people will you be working with on projects in future? Find out what they do not like and what they will not stand or tolerate. And likewise, make what you won't tolerate known to the partner you're connecting with. That contact will appreciate you for it. I certainly do appreciate contacts when they're upfront and honest, and when they talk about things that they love, that they're genuinely interested in. Whatever the topic is, it will get you closer, it will get you to understand who they are, not what they do for a living. Social capital is incredibly important if a company wants to forge great relationships in its teams. Well, what is social capital? Social capital is the value you have attached to that communication process. So how important is social capital to you in the long run? And how important is it to the nature of the work you do? You should now be able to answer these comprehension questions. Who would you hit up if you needed help finding a job? Do you like to mingle with new people at business or social events? Why? Or why not? How would you strike up a conversation with a person you've never met before? Who would you like to reach out to and why? What are some common icebreakers you can think of that are popular in your country? And how important is social capital where you work? Also, when coming across new verbs, always try to think of how you'd conjugate these in the past, present and future, and case singular and plural nouns. So strike is the infinitive form of the verb in this case. What's the past simple and what's its past participle? The past simple of strike is struck, and so is the past participle. So it's strike, struck, struck, but not strike, struck, stricken. Stricken is actually an adjective. Stricken is actually pejorative because it means suffering from the effects of something unpleasant. So don't use it as a verb. Now we'll move on to some critical listening. I'll be playing an excerpt of a TED Talk by David Burkus called How to Hack Networking. Watch and listen attentively, and take down some notes as you listen. Jot down some interesting points, and don't forget to listen out for the useful vocabulary and expressions in the video that we've heard in the previous slides in this video tutorial, because David Burkus will be using them. David Burkus is an English speaker, a professional, and also an excellent orator. So make sure to write down a few points as you listen, but you might not have time to write whole sentences, so keep it short. Also, after the video, you'll be able to discuss the following questions, or at least some of them. I'll be linking you to the entire video in the description below, so look out for that so you can watch the full video.
So we all have that person in our lives who seems to be connected to everyone. You know, that person with the perfect elevator pitch, that person who knows how to work a room, that person who keeps winning friends and influencing people, that person who never eats alone, that person who's the quintessential networker. Don't you just hate them? I mean, you don't hate them outright, but you probably hate that somehow networking and making connections, it seems so easy to them. And every time you try, you just feel like that sleazy weirdo pushing business cards in everyone's hand. Or you make a conscious effort to go to that networking event, and then you end up standing in the corner of the room next to someone you already knew, trying to figure out how long you have to stay and how to leave without being noticed. I'm right there with you. Most of us are. And we know that networking and professional connections are hugely important to our careers and our lives. In one study, executives who were taught to see what sociologists call social capital. This is the value in an existing network and the potential value in new network connections. The executives who were trained to see social capital were more likely to get promotions, more likely to get raises, they had more fulfilling careers overall. And we know that companies whose employees are rich in social capital dramatically outperform their competitors. But working makes us feel awkward. In one study, participants were asked about a time where they had to reach out and make a new professional connection. And the participants who had to do that were more likely to experience subconscious thoughts of getting clean. So translate, networking makes us feel dirty. So how do we reconcile these two ideas? We know we need a robust network, but we know we feel really awkward every time we try. Well, the good news is that the same studies that demonstrate the power of a social network also offer a totally different and refreshing way to look at it. In fact, they suggest that we need to redefine networking. Networking is not really something you do. A network's not something you have. It's not about meeting strangers. In fact, the best definition is probably that it's about understanding the network that's already around you and acting accordingly. I mean, I like to think of it as it's about knowing who's a friend and who's a friend of a friend. And when you adopt that mentality and you look at the research, you're left with three implications that almost anyone can do, hopefully without feeling awkward. The first is that, contrary to popular belief, some of the biggest wins, the low-hanging fruit in networking, if you will, comes not from meeting total strangers, but actually from reaching out to old friends. Sociologists call these weak ties or dormant ties. And dormant ties are those friends that you used to be close with, but for whatever reason, you don't talk to as much anymore. And because those people are in different social circles now, or different industries, sometimes different geographies, they provide the same new information and new opportunities than total strangers would, but it's easier to build rapport with them because they're not strangers. They're literally your friends. You just haven't talked to them in a while. One of my favorite examples of dormant ties unlocking a powerful connection is the story of Dana White and Lorenzo Fertitta. And you might recognize those names. Those are two of the three former owners of the Ultimate Fighting Championship, which was just sold for $4 billion. I'm paying attention. The story goes that Dana and Lorenzo were high school acquaintances. They went to high school together until Dana got kicked out, which is the ultimate way to become a dormant tie. And about 10 years later, the two reconnected at a high school friend's wedding. They found out that they shared a mutual love of prize fighting. Dana was managing a few early UFC fighters. Lorenzo was working in his family's casino business and serving on the boxing commission. And they reconnected over the shared love of prize fighting, and they did what most of us probably do when we meet an old friend. We go, well, that was great. We should do it again sometime soon. But unlike us, they actually did. A couple weeks later, Dana found out that the original owners of the UFC were losing money and were looking to get rid of the franchise. So he calls his new old friend Lorenzo, and he says, hey, I think the UFC is for sale, and I think you should buy it. And they do. And they give Dana 10%, which is awesome. And the combination of Dana's knowledge of the sport, Lorenzo's connections with the athletic commission, makes for a powerful connection that would have never happened had two friends not reconnected at a high school wedding. Now, I know what you're thinking. If your takeaway is go to more high school weddings and reunions, that doesn't solve the awkwardness problem. So try this. Make a list of 4 or 5 people you haven't talked to in a while. Scroll all the way down to the bottom of your friend list on Facebook and reach back out to those people. You don't have to have an agenda. In fact, that's what makes it awkward. Just reach out and see where the conversation goes. You'd be amazed. But there are times where you have to step outside of your circle. And when you do, the best way to do that is actually to go through your circle. When you have to meet new connections, the best way to do it is through friends of friends.
Thanks for sticking around and watching this video until the end. We hope you enjoyed the content. If you did, subscribe on your way out, as always, and also give this video a thumbs up. The focus of today's video tutorial was to help conversation flow. So we focused on some useful tactics, we focused on some useful phrases and techniques, and of course collocations to help improve our students' fluency and confidence when speaking in English, as well as boosting your vocabulary. The lesson today opened with a few vocabulary expressions and collocations related to the TEDx video called How to Hack Networking, which I shall be linking to in the description below. So do check out the video, and I do recommend that our students watch the video to see how the speaker uses all of these phrasal verbs and expressions in context so that you can start using them as well. We also would like you to give your opinion on the quote at the beginning of today's video tutorial. Tell us what you think the quote means. Tell us whether you've understood it. Tell us what this quote means to you as a professional. Tell us if you agree with it and how it could relate to your business. Also, tell us what you thought about the content of this video and whether you were using those collocations and whether you found them useful. Also, what are the best places for you to go to network? Try to answer those questions that we asked you at the beginning of today's video tutorial, and leave us a comment in the section below. We look forward to hearing more from you as always. See you next time.